So with ODST Firefight arriving in the Master Chief Collection later this year, I figured it was a good time to cover who the ODSTs are. As a military unit, how did they get their start, what do they do, and how did the UNSC use them? I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So ODST is an acronym which stands for Orbital Drop Shock Trooper. They are an elite group of units in the UNSC Marine Corps, most known for their rather unique way of entering the battlefield. They are inserted via small one-man pods. These pods are dropped from warships in orbit and fall into the atmosphere, much like a spacecraft re-enters the atmosphere here in real life. The soldiers themselves are specially trained for a wide variety of very unique combat situations. Everything from straight-up engaging enemy combatants to sabotage and reconnaissance. Due to their unique form of deployment, the UNSC ended up using them very similarly to the way we use paratroopers in real life. Generally, they were sent in behind enemy lines to take out key targets or secure enemy facilities. They also made fairly effective reconnaissance units. Their ability to deploy basically anywhere on the battlefield made them valuable in that role as well. When it comes to equipment, the ODSTs are trained to use basically any weapon they'll find on the battlefield. While they often use the same weapons as other UNSC units, some do use very specialized equipment. We see several, for example, using silenced weapons, which fits well with the idea of carrying out covert close-quarters operations. These include things like a silenced version of the M7 submachine gun. Unlike other units in the UNSC Marine Corps, they do actually wear some pretty serious body armor. Not that the Marines aren't wearing body armor, mind you, but the ODSTs are wearing like a suit of armor. And on top of all of that, they have their helmets. Their full-seal helmets allow them to operate effectively in vacuums and in the presence of chemical and radiological weapons. And there's one more piece of equipment that's well worth mentioning: the single-occupant exo-atmospheric insertion vehicle. Most of us will know them, though, as drop pods. These one-man pods can be deployed from a variety of different UNSC warships. After being released, they fall into the atmosphere of the planet that the warship is over, where the pod takes the brunt of the heat of the atmospheric re-entry. Once it is through that atmospheric re-entry, it slows itself down and impacts the ground, at which point the ODST is able to evacuate the pod and partake in combat. We know that in the UNSC Marine Corps there are at least 4 different ODST units, but we know the names of only 2. The 105th Shock Trooper Division, which includes most of the ODSTs we see in Halo 2 and 3, and the 65th Shock Trooper Division, which includes the ODSTs we see in Halo 3 ODST. So how did the Orbital Drop Shock Trooper get its start? Well, as I mentioned before, their tactics date all the way back to World War II with things like paratroopers. But the direct predecessor to the ODSTs were developed in 2129. The United Nations began utilizing troops that could be deployed from orbit rapidly. These would become known as drop jet platoons. They would be utilized in some of the early interplanetary wars before the invention of the slipspace drive. The more modern units of the ODSTs that we see in the Halo games get their start a little bit later. When the UNSC Marine Corps was founded in 2163, the drop jet platoons were roped into their numbers and officially became Orbital Drop Shock Troopers. However, during the first few hundred years of their existence, they really didn't see much action. The first real deployment of ODSTs would be in 2490. ODSTs would see significant deployments during the war with the insurrection. For example, we know the 10th Shock Trooper Battalion was deployed to Jericho 7 and Arcadia during the war. When war broke out between the UNSC and the Covenant, ODSTs saw a whole new type of combat. This straight-up fight against a capable enemy was very different from fighting insurrectionists. In fact, during the Human Covenant War, ODSTs were involved in almost every major battle, although they were rarely on the offensive, often called in as heavy reinforcements to back up UNSC forces that were being overwhelmed by a Covenant attack. And while they saw action in the Human Covenant War as early as a few months after first contact, they were most notably used during the Battle of Earth, during which ODSTs carried out raids against Covenant forces in Eastern Africa. If you want to learn more about the Battle of Earth, some of the tactics used, and some of the units involved, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down below in the comments what you think of ODSTs. Do you think they were an effective fighting force, or do you think their job could simply have been done by a handful of Marines in a Pelican? And lastly, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.